It's your boy Young I give him that thing. Control like stand up America. Banyi doll ban control like stand up America. Banyi doll ban wo ko jile kankar watana wache. Oga level like gear kwa ugarai like panda wadia banyi America. Banyi doll ban chingitongo pandon kujura baya cheka. Watu panda juru wadia bi Panchi America, Panji Dwala, Panta Leg
Welcome to Lagos State Media show. It's a very important day to all of us as the world is celebrating the inauguration of President-elect Joseph R. Biden, President of the United States. Is going to happen very soon. Lagos State Media will bring you some live coverages for those who have no access to watch the live news. You can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, or stream live. So thank you so much. Join me. Let me just take you down to where the celebration is about to take place. As you can see, the visitors are just coming in. Everybody's taking seat. We are about to go to the action, which is there are two things happening today in Capitol Hill in Washington D.C. We have elected presidents coming up for inauguration, and the outgoing president has left. Is not going to attend the inauguration. I would like also to share that with you. Donald Trump has left without attending the inauguration of Joe Biden. Let's listen to Al Jazeera here.
Angela Merkel will not be in the Chancellery for very much longer. And it was interesting, looking at those collage pictures of his presidency. Angela Merkel, non-verbal leakage, you could clearly see what she and some other European leaders were thinking about him. I remember you reporting, I think it was on the NATO summit, where he literally body-checked the Prime Minister of Montenegro out the way. And then the tsunami of opinion in America was interesting off the back of that, because his supporters didn't actually mind him barging to the front of the photo op. No, and clearly his supporters supported what you heard laid out for the very first time 4 years ago when he spoke at that podium where Joe Biden will speak in under 4 hours time now and be sworn in. And that was that dystopian vision of America, but also America first and the policies of America first. And it may well be, you look at the wall that wasn't built, you looked at lots of the other things that the Trump administration said they would do, and they didn't. But certainly they did pursue an America first, isolationist foreign policy. And that clearly is going to be very different with the administration of President Biden. They're going to work closely with their allies. They have some huge challenges to face, some of them very urgent. You've got to look, I think, particularly at two nuclear challenges they've got. You've got Iran, where Donald Trump tried a policy of maximum pressure, didn't do anything at all, didn't change things greatly, and certainly it meant that having pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, that the Iranian government decided not to continue with that deal. So
Veronica.
Tough challenge now for President Biden, who says he wants to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal, and a very tough timeline for that, with Iran's own presidential election coming in a matter of months. Then on the Korean Peninsula, another nuclear situation that requires nuclear diplomacy. Very different approach there by President Trump, starting off with threatening to destroy North Korea. I was there in the UN General Assembly when he said that in September 2017, to then completely changing and meeting the North Koreans, giving them 2 presidential visits without the North Koreans in any way backing down in any way, and even then a 3rd trip to the demilitarized zone, and President Trump becoming the first president to walk on North Korean soil. The story really, as far as international attention, ends there, because nothing has happened since. No real further diplomacy. That leaves, I think, very few options for President Biden, but it's going to have to be near the top of his agenda. Another one that, where the time is pressing, is Afghanistan. Under that deal the US did with the Taliban, in a few months' time they're supposed to pull all the US troops out of Afghanistan. Is President Biden going to do that? And of course there are the big relationships he's got to deal with. He's got to deal with China. How is he going to respond to China? The Trump administration got tougher and tougher on China. Clearly he has to find a way forward. Again, the answer the Biden administration are giving us is they're going to work together with their allies. And of course there's also Russia and the difficult relationship with President Putin. President Trump was not someone ever to confront President Putin. It's going to be different under Biden, but the first big test of that is an important arms control treaty that expires at the beginning of February, the New START treaty. That, I think, is likely to be extended. They'll have to work with the Russians, and they'll have to work with them here on Capitol Hill. And presumably as well, James, we will not, from the Biden administration, one remembers your reporting from North Korea in the run-up to the Singapore summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. We will not, from Biden, have him saying again and again and again very lovely things about people like Kim Jong-un, Jair Bolsonaro. And we will not, from Joe Biden, see him standing in a presser with Vladimir Putin, siding with Vladimir Putin, despite what his own intelligence gathering services were telling him, Mr. Trump, I mean, about the allegations to do with collusion and Russian interference, brackets, allegedly, close brackets, in the last US election. Yes, I think you won't have any of those things, I don't think, and certainly the closest allies of the US will say, please, no, we do not want to ever see that again. When we feel uncomfortable and the US's adversaries actually feel more comfortable with the US president. So I think that sort of approach is going to be reversed. But I think it's also fair to say that it's 75 years since the end of the World War II, and that's when all of the US's close alliances have been built, most importantly the NATO alliance. And all of that time, until President Trump, was building trust in those relationships. Well, trust is something that takes a long time to build and is easy to lose. So after 4 years of President Trump, I think people are relieved, and I've spoken to diplomats from a number of European and other nations in recent weeks and recent months, and they are relieved by the Biden victory. But they're going to be looking over their shoulders because they know there's a 4-year election cycle. We know that President Trump has just moments ago flown over here and probably got a good a good view of what's going on here on Capitol Hill ahead of this inauguration. But he's not necessarily flying out of politics. Potentially, he could run again in 4 years' time. And if it's not President Trump, it could be another president with very similar America First policies. James, for the moment, many thanks. We'll talk to you later, I am sure. We'll talk to Shihab Ratansi, our correspondent on the Mall, in just a moment. First, you're looking at pictures there, Marine One having touched down beside Air Force One on board the outgoing President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. Alan Fisher making the point that when it was initially floated as an idea that Donald Trump was going to stand for the presidency, people in America, political insiders, politics watchers in Washington, up and down the United States said, no, he won't do it, or he'll drop out. You may remember those pictures, those sound bites from various people in the world of movies, acting, Hollywood, saying, Donald Trump president, never going to happen. Well, what you're looking at right now, the dying minutes of the Trump presidency before he and Mrs. Trump, Melania Trump, board Air Force One, making their way to Mar-a-Lago. We're staying with these pictures just to give you a sense of what's going on, but also because we think, and I stress think, there's a chance that Mr. Trump may give us a little speech, a little bit of his thinking at this time as he draws a veil over his accent.
That was Obama and Michelle Obama. They are coming in.
desk to the most important job on the planet. Being taken back to the White House, he strode up the colonnaded steps on the inside of the White House. He took the mask off his face with his right hand. He looked out of breath and he looked a bit flushed. And there were questions that we never really got an answer to when it came to the drugs he was given when he was inside hospital, because he was given a cocktail of drugs. And there was a lot of speculation for days and days and days as to how a man, a mature man, let's call it what it is, an old man, a man who's in the target area for contracting COVID-19 in the worst possible way, could make such a strong comeback. Although in real terms, the choreography and what they did with coronavirus changed dramatically after Mr. Trump came back from his COVID-19 diagnosis, because everyone in the administration started washing their hands. They all started using alcohol gel. They all started wearing face masks. We've seen it just in the past few days, still ongoing. We were seeing it there over the shoulder of James Bays, our diplomatic editor, on Capitol Hill. I don't know if you noticed it. It was off behind James. We could see the chairs not lined up, chair after chair after chair, little groups, little clusters of 2 chairs to the left, 2 chairs to the right, just waiting there for Mr. Trump to disembark Marine One before he makes his way to Mar-a-Lago. Alan was confirming for us the reporting that we've had in the past, 6 hours or so, that on board Marine One will be the security service personnel who carry the so-called nuclear satchel. It has the nuclear launch codes, and then on the stroke of midday local time, the control mechanism that travels with that security services member will be disabled. And at the same precise second, a parallel device that is in the immediate orbit of Joe Biden when he becomes president, because you cannot have 2 US presidents at the same time, clearly, that will then be activated, because that's something that is always within, we are told, 50, 60 yards, 50, 60 meters of the US president, wherever he is. Let's stay with these pictures, and we'll talk to Shihab Ratanzi, who is on the National Mall. So, Shihab, it should be tens or hundreds of thousands of people, instead of which we're seeing hundreds of thousands of flags and also hundreds of lights. And each light on each side of the mall represents the number of people who died since COVID-19 hit the United States.
Yes, 191,000 flags and representing the 56 territories and states of the United States, as well as US flags here. This is always going to be a less populated inauguration. Even before the events of January the 6th, the storming of the Capitol, the Biden transition team had told people to stay away because of the pandemic. After January the 6th, though, the decision was made to completely shut down the National Mall and prevent spectators, as you say, usually tens of thousands of spectators here, not far from the mall. We are expecting one protest today in DC, and interestingly, it's from a progressive group. The Working Families
I'm
Party,
going to stop you there, my friend, for a second. Forgive me. We just want to get a sense of that 21-gun salute there, honoring the outgoing President Trump.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we love you. And I can tell you that from the bottom of my heart. This has been an incredible 4 years. We've accomplished so much together. I want to thank all of my family and my friends and my staff and so many other people for being here. I want to thank you for your effort, your hard work. People have no idea how hard this family worked. They worked, and they worked for you. They could have had a much easier life, but they did a fantastic job. I just want to thank all of you, everyone. I want to thank Mark Meadows, who's here, someplace right there. I want to thank Mark. But it's been something very special. We've accomplished a lot. Our First Lady has been a woman of great grace and beauty and dignity. And so popular with the people, so popular with the people. In fact, honey, would you like to say a few words, please?
Being your First Lady was my greatest honor. Thank you for your love and your support. You will be in my thoughts and prayers. God bless you all. God bless your families. And God bless this beautiful nation. Thank you.
What else has to be said, right? But what we've done, that's true, honey, great job. What we've done has been amazing by any standard. We rebuilt the United States military. We created a new force called Space Force. That in itself would be a major achievement for a regular administration. We were not a regular administration. We took care of the vets, 91% approval rating. They've never had that before. The vets have given us, the VA, the vets have given us an approval rating like has never been before. We took care of our vets and our beautiful vets. They were very badly treated before we came along. And as you know, we get them great service and we pick up the bill and they can go out and they can see a doctor if they have to wait long periods of time. We got it so that we can sadly get rid of people that don't treat our vets properly. We didn't have any of those rights before when I came on. So our vets are happy, our people are happy, our military is thrilled. We also got tax cuts, the largest tax cut and reform in the history of our country by far. I hope they don't raise your taxes. But if they do, I told you so. And if you look at the regulations, which I consider the regulation cuts to be maybe even more important, that's why we have such good and have had such good job numbers. The job numbers have been absolutely incredible. When we started, had we not been hit by the pandemic, we would have had numbers that would never have been seen. Already our numbers are the best ever. If you look at what happened until February a year ago, our numbers were at a level that nobody had ever seen before. And even now, we really built it twice. We got hit. Nobody blames us for that. The whole world got hit. And then we built it again. And now the stock market is actually substantially higher than it was at its higher point prior to the pandemic. So it's really, you could say we built it twice. And you're going to see incredible numbers start coming in if everything is sort of left alone. Be careful. Very complex. Be careful. But you're going to see some incredible things happening. And remember us when you see these things happening, if you would. Remember us, because I'm looking at elements of our economy that are set to be a rocket ship up. It's a rocket ship up. We have the greatest country in the world. We have the greatest economy in the world. And as bad as the pandemic was, we were hit so hard, just like the entire world was hit so hard. Places that thought they got away with it didn't get away with it. They're suffering right now. We did something that is really considered a medical miracle. They're calling it a miracle, and that was the vaccine. We got the vaccine developed in 9 months instead of 9 years or 5 years or 10 years or a long time. It was supposed to take a long time, many, many years to develop a vaccine. We have 2 out. We have another one coming almost immediately. And it really is a great achievement. So you should start to see really good numbers over the next few months. I think you're going to see those numbers really skyrocket downward. And I can only say this, we have worked hard. We've left it all, as the athletes would say, we've left it all in the field. We don't have to come and say, we'll never say in a month when we're sitting in Florida, we're not going to be looking at each other and saying, you know, if we only worked a little bit harder, you can't work harder. And we had a lot of obstacles, and we went through the obstacles, and we just got 75 million votes, and that's a record in the history of sitting presidents. That's an all-time record by a lot, by many millions. In the history of sitting presidents, it's been really just an honor. One of the things we're very, very proud of is the selection of almost 300 federal judges and 3 great Supreme Court justices. That's a very big number. That's a record-setting number. And so we've done a lot, and there's still things to do. The first thing we have to do is pay our respects and our love to the incredible people and families who suffered so gravely from the China virus. It's a horrible thing that was put onto the world. We all know where it came from, but it's a horrible, horrible thing. So be very careful. Be very, very careful. But we want to pay great love to all of the people that have suffered, including families who have suffered so gravely. So with that, I just want to say you are amazing people. This is a great, great country. It is my greatest honor and privilege to have been your president.
That is the speech of
I will
Donald J.
always
Trump.
fight for you.
And
I will be
life
watching.
is still
I will be
going on.
listening.
Now
And
the
I will tell you that
the people are just sitting, arriving in the inaugurations. Want to watch and see them.
I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular. And again,
traditionally, it is a day of ceremony.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
Grandeur.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
Rituals stretching back to America's founding. Joe Biden's is the 59th U.S. presidential inauguration. And across those more than 200 years of history, there have been some standouts. Times when images have become iconic, and words have captured moments of generational change.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Moments of political transition.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
And sometimes moments where Americans were told what they most wanted to hear and maybe needed to believe about themselves.
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Messages have been sent to both allies and adversaries.
That we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
And a few inaugurations are remembered only because something bizarre happened. Like in 1841, when William Henry Harrison wanted to prove he was tough by speaking for 2 hours on a cold, wet day, purposely without an overcoat. He died of pneumonia exactly a month later. And 12 years earlier, when Andrew Jackson threw up in the White House to anyone and everyone, it got so out of hand, he had to escape his own party by climbing out a window. But the ones history most remembers are the ones that captured a moment and seemed to bend it to the new president's will. In 1933, a nation teetering on the brink of economic ruin heard these words.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
And by all accounts, the national mood began to change. Perhaps appropriately, the most famous inaugural address was delivered by the president often considered America's greatest. In 1865, as the Civil War drew to a close, Abraham Lincoln called for unity. With malice toward none, he said, with charity for all, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. Words that once again resonate in this deeply divided America of 2021.
Well, I'm really pleased to introduce to you Jennifer Victor, who is a professor of political science at the Charlotte School of Policy and Government at George Mason University here in University. And Jennifer's going to be with us for our special broadcast, which begins at the top of the next hour at 1600 GMT. But I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to her now and get some initial thoughts. Jennifer, this is the most cliche question I can ask you. I'm going to get it out the way early. How do you feel as an American today? I ask that only because I know that this day, the peaceful transfer of power is important. It is symbolic, and it is, well, we see it behind us.
There's really a mix of emotions. I mean, on the one hand, this day is historic and it needs to be celebratory, and there are all sorts of norms and traditions that are really important for making this the poignant moment that it is. On the other hand, you know, we've never seen one like this before in our lifetimes. There is no crowd here. The last inauguration I was at was 12 years ago, and there were literally millions of people crowded around this mall. And now, where there used to be revelers, there are National Guard troops and armed guards.
What's your memories of that? 12 years ago, that was Obama's...
It was Obama's first inauguration in 2009.
Well,
that was the last one I was at.
Event, wasn't it?
And it was intense. There was lots of emotion in the crowd at the historic nature of the first African-American president being inaugurated, and just so much positivity. And it's just such a contrast from what we have today.
Yeah, in fact, looking at that and just thinking that amazing shot behind us 2 weeks ago was overrun with people. Do you think Joe Biden, and I've asked this of some of my other guests as well, do you think Joe Biden would explicitly reference that? I mean, we're all wondering what he'll say in speech. We know he'll talk about unity, but it would be kind of hard not to at least think about what happened there.
He will certainly acknowledge it in some way. What exact explicit words he uses to recognize the event will be interesting to hear. But I think, you know, the calmness and the lack of people at this event that should be very crowded is, of course, a function of both the pandemic and the security threat. And I expect he will pay homage to both of those irregularities.
Let's talk about the other people who are not here, and that is the Trumps. I have been watching a lot of US television news while I've been here, and the word I keep seeing is snub. Some networks call it a historic snub. Now, it is. He is the first president not to attend his successor's inauguration since, I think it was 1869.
Correct.
So it is historic. Do you think people, Americans, observers, will care in the end, or is this actually the day to move on? And actually, having him here might have been a distraction in the end.
It could have been. I think it's important to keep in mind today that there is not one way that Americans are experiencing this event.
Yeah.
There are two different realities out there, two different perceptions of what is fact in America right now. And so we cannot make a blanket statement about how people are experiencing this event and how they will anticipate the words that Joe Biden shares with the country, because frankly, not everyone agrees that he should be the president. Political scientists have for years now been talking about how political polarization results in the
what have you spotted? Hang on, let's have a look.
The motorcade is just arriving behind us.
Yeah.
I thought I had seen the motorcade earlier, but that must have been different VIPs, perhaps family. In any case, the motorcycles are noisy. So, but what I was saying is political scientists know that polarization results in the breakdown of norms, and the norm of the outgoing president not being here is just another one that we are seeing broken today.
We'll just pause for a second, Jennifer. Apparently, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have arrived. You will have to forgive me. Sometimes our pictures are a little bit behind what you're seeing, but I'm certainly seeing the car there. I mean, let's just pause and think about that, Jennifer. Joe Biden, 78 years old, is about to take on the biggest job of his life, the biggest job in the world. That's quite a thing to do at, I won't say at his age, but at this point in his career, after everything is done. I mean, everything's been leading to this point. But, I mean, wow, the responsibility on his shoulders now. Let's have a little listen.
It certainly is immense, and it's hard to imagine what he's feeling today, but he's also somebody who has essentially been running for president for 40 years, yeah. 30 years maybe. So he's been anticipating this moment for a very long time, perhaps more than almost any other president who's ever been inaugurated.
Joe Biden from Scranton, Pennsylvania, as I said before. His full name, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., at the age of 78 will become the US president. The time currently 10:28 here in Washington, so almost 90 minutes until President Trump's term expires. And Joe Biden becomes the new president of the United States. An extraordinary moment to witness, isn't it, Jennifer? I mean, any inauguration is, let's be absolutely fair with that one, but there's something about this one, this sort of sense of destiny that Joe Biden is supposed to get here, though. His speech yesterday in Delaware, when he got very emotional talking about his son and actually saying it should be my son who's being inaugurated today. You've got to always keep at the back of our minds that extraordinary personal journey he's been on.
Absolutely, and I think he has a particular skill for evoking empathy among people and for displaying empathy. And I think when he gets choked up and he talks about his family who has passed and so forth, he is reaching out in a paternalistic kind of way towards Americans in a way that many will receive as very positive.
Many will receive, and I think that's important. And you made the point earlier that there's still a lot of people, as much as there were any number of people who felt Trump was quote unquote the bad guy, there's 74 million who will now say, no, Joe Biden's not our guy. And that is an extraordinary split for Joe Biden to bridge. And I guess we have to keep remembering, he'll give a speech today, he will start making efforts, but there's no magic wand here, not for the level of division we have in the country.
He'll certainly make a lot of platitudes towards doing what he can to heal those divisions. And if we're looking for any potential theme in his speech today, I would guess that it's going to be about healing, just based on the situation in the country right now. Healing refers to a lot of different crises that are happening, both with the pandemic and the security threats and so forth. And it was a theme that he talked about at the memorial last night at the Lincoln Monument. And so, I think he's going to try to evoke that sense of healing and emotion from all Americans, but they will not all receive that same message in the same way.
Jennifer Victor with us now and for the rest of our special broadcast, which begins, as I said, 1600 hours GMT, right after this news hour. It'll be 11 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. We will take you through all the events as they happen on this day, January 20th, 2021, Inauguration Day in the United States.
Kamal, for the moment, thank you very much. That was Nancy Pelosi talking to one of her staffers as she makes her way into the Capitol building there. She was in the church with Joe Biden, where he was, as well as going through the church ceremony, trying to build bridges across the political divide in the US political system. Let's talk now to Manuel Rapallo. He's at the closest security checkpoint to the White House. Now, Manny, we should be seeing people on the streets. We should be maybe glimpsing a certain party atmosphere on the streets there, but we're not. We're seeing big fences and lots of security.
Certainly, under normal circumstances, this is the part of town where you'd see tens of thousands of people lining up just to catch a glimpse of the president walking down Pennsylvania Avenue on his way to the White House. That's traditionally how it's been done. It is a very different Washington, D.C. than people are used to. Just to give you a sense of where we are right now, as you mentioned, we're outside of a secure perimeter, as close as you can get to the White House right now. Of course, behind that perimeter, that metal fence, is a line of National Guards troops. Their number one priority is securing the inauguration taking place today. But, you know, the mood still seems jovial. There's music. There are vendors selling merchandise with Biden-Harris photographs on buttons and posters and even face masks. It is jovial. There does seem to be a very positive mood. There's certainly nothing around here that we could characterize as a protest or a demonstration, certainly not anything that we would characterize as a violent scene. But again, today is the day that more than 20,000 National Guards troops have been preparing for, guarding and securing the peaceful transition of power here in Washington. We've been driving around throughout the course of the morning, different parts of Washington, D.C., downtown D.C., still with that ever-changing secure perimeter around the city, with new street closures being announced, police, Secret Service, National Guards troops on every corner and every alleyway, making sure that it's going to be a secure and peaceful transfer of power here in Washington.
Manny, putting on your Mexico correspondent cap for the next minute or so, we know we're going to get an executive order signed off in the next 24 hours or so from Mr. Biden about the wall, about Donald Trump's wall. Does that executive order with one signature begin to soften the relationship between the government in Mexico City and the Biden administration, the American government in Washington?
Not only for Mexico, but for many countries in Latin America, in Central America, it's almost a collective sigh of relief at this point. So many of the policies that were put in place by the Trump administration that have drawn condemnation from international human rights observers that have really stretched the limits of international law. Not only policies that resulted in family separations, policies that resulted in women and children being put in cages, and policies that led to countries like Mexico being labeled quote-unquote safe third countries, where asylum seekers were forced to wait for their asylum claims in the United States to be processed. So today is very symbolic and represents a new path forward in that immigration relationship that the United States has with Mexico, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. We know that this sweeping immigration policy being proposed and unveiled today by the incoming Biden administration is significant. It's still going to require a passing vote from Congress, but the fact that this is a top priority piece of legislation by the incoming administration shows how important this issue is in the United States and how important the relationship between the United States and Mexico is at the moment.
Manny, thank you very much. Manuel Rapallo, our correspondent there on the streets of Washington. Let's go to Capitol Hill, and our diplomatic editor, James Bays. Now, James, various presidents and prime ministers around the world, what's the theme they want to hear from incoming President Mr. Biden?
Well, I think there are two things. I've been speaking to quite a lot of high-level officials from countries, particularly allies of the US, and there are two things that are absolutely top of the agenda. One is COVID-19 recovery around the world, both the economic damage and trying to deal with COVID-19 in some parts of the world where they don't yet have vast sources of the vaccine. That's number one, and clearly we're going to see President Biden, as he will be in an hour's time, this afternoon sign a series of executive orders. One of those is going to be on COVID, and it's that executive order will include the US rejoining the World Health Organization. Now, the other key one is a much longer term but also crucial issue for the world, and that's climate change. He's going to sign up to the Paris Climate Change Accord. It's worth telling you where I am now. All the dignitaries are gathering, and among those I just saw moments ago, we're not allowed to move from where we are, which is a shame because he was only a few feet away from me, and that's John Kerry, the former Secretary of State, who is going to start his job in about an hour's time as the US climate change special envoy, and clearly a very important job, and clearly part of his job done on the first day, getting the US back in that Paris climate deal. Those are the two things I think that most allies would say that they want the US to do and concentrate on, but there is a huge list of things ahead for this administration.
Okay, James, we'll talk to you very soon, I'm sure. Thank you for that. Let's bring in Rachel Bloom. She's Assistant Professor of Political Sciences at the University of Oklahoma. She joins us on Skype from Norman, Oklahoma. Rachel Bloom, great to get your thoughts at this time. Clearly, there are people around the world who want to take a moment of a moment of, okay, we can breathe, we can decompress. The days of Donald Trump have gone. But can I suggest to you that for the 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump, they're kind of mirrored internationally. You know, Jair Bolsonaro, the Israeli prime minister, the Russian president, certain other people around the region that I'm sitting in the Middle East, they were quite happy with President Trump. How will they react to President Biden?
Well, a lot of them still don't believe that President Biden was actually elected. And that is a big problem going forward, that there's a part of the American electorate and a large part of the Republican electorate that don't see this as a free and fair election, and that really won't accept any evidence to the contrary. And if we have that kind of division at home, it's hard to give a unified message to the world.
And the anger that we saw being displayed on January the 6th, when those people wearing quasi-military uniforms stormed the Capitol building. We were carrying a report from one of our correspondents in Virginia. Those people are still on the streets demanding their right to look like insurrectionists. I don't like using the word, but it's the right word. Carrying their guns. The anger that makes them behave in that way, is that anger going to go away after a couple of Joe Biden speeches?
I don't think so. And I think part of the reason is because it didn't start with Donald Trump. So I've been researching the Tea Party movement for years, and all of this at least goes back to then. But of course, there are roots that go back much, much further. But since 2008 or 2009, there's been an undercurrent of this kind of civil unrest, of militia-style organizing, of calls to have what they call a legal insurrection to overthrow the government, to take back our house. So what we saw on January 6th was the culmination of something that has been building very visibly for the past decade in the United States.
Does that mean that Steve Bannon, who's been pardoned by his friend Donald Trump now, that Steve Bannon was right? Once he was got rid of from the White House, he reportedly apparently said Mr. Trump didn't understand what Mr. Trump was for, what the Trump presidency was really about.
I think he might have been right about that, although there are some other ways that maybe Trump understood what he was doing the whole time. He understood that he was very magnetic to a certain part of the electorate, to especially white voters, that anytime he tried to drum up sentiment about race or threats, that these voters responded, and he was very, very good at doing that. So to some extent, he might not have been familiar with the political landscape he was stepping into, but he was familiar with what he was doing, and he saw the effects, and he enjoyed them, and he continued to encourage them.
Moving forward, does the Republican Party still need Donald Trump? Because he put them in power after all said and done.
This is a big debate going forward. I think there will be some division on this for at least a couple more presidential election cycles. Because on the one hand, Trump did win the Electoral College in 2016, and the Republicans have done okay in Congress, at least in 2016. They've only recently lost the Senate, and only by a narrow margin. But on the other hand, American electoral institutions, from the Electoral College to how congressional district lines are drawn, favor Republicans. So it doesn't take a whole lot for Republicans to win. They'll win about half the races unless something really catastrophic happens. So it's not entirely clear, I think, to a lot of Republicans going forward, that Donald Trump or carrying on the Trump legacy is necessarily the only path to victory. I think we'll see a lot of soul searching in the next 4 to 8 years.
Does that mean that if Mr. Trump were to go ahead with this idea that he's kind of hinting about even today, if he sets up his own political movement / party, that might actually be bad news for the Republican Party, because that would split the vote? Because if you've got, in effect, a two-party system, if you get a little upstart party coming in, stage left, that takes away from the main party of, quote, opposition.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we've seen this happen before. We could think 1911 when Teddy Roosevelt splits off with his own party. It's happened. It would be bad news for the Republicans in the short term, but I think good news for their party in the long term, and good news for American democracy if the movement or the faction that Trump is right now the titular leader of, if that were sidelined a little bit from political power.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Rachel Bloom, great to get your thoughts on this important, significant day. Let's go back to my colleague, Alan Fisher, who's just overlooking the White House there. So, Alan, we've seen Mr. Trump leave Washington. Spectacle number one has headed towards Florida. We're now focusing in on Mr. Biden being formally sworn in. And those executive orders, that's his initial stamp on the Oval Office.
Exactly right. Now, we've known for a couple of days that he intended to sign a series of executive orders, but it's become clearer over the last few hours exactly what those executive orders will do. One of the first ones will be to get the United States back into the Paris Climate Accord. You heard James talking about John Kerry. He's very keen to do that, and he will work in his role as special envoy with other countries to ensure that the US isn't bearing the brunt of the changes that have to be made to try and lower global emissions. Some would say it's already too late, but certainly Joe Biden wants to have a go at doing it and sees one way of doing that through the efforts that they make through the Paris Climate Accord. He's going to reverse Donald Trump's Muslim ban. You'll remember that very early on in his presidency, he signed a ban stopping people who were essentially Muslim flying into the United States. That led to huge lines at the airport, huge protests at the airport. And Steve Bannon, who you were talking about with the guest, actually said that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to cause real problems in the first week or so of the Trump administration. Well, Joe Biden is going to overturn that. He's also going to put forward within the first month, we are told, a comprehensive immigration plan, which will lead to citizenship for around 11 million undocumented migrants. Now, there are a few Republicans have been talking about unity. They're saying they simply won't be able to agree with that, and that might get the Biden administration off to a bad start with those Republicans who want to talk about unity. But Joe Biden believes there is a possibility of a deal being done there, that those on the Hill realize there is the need to do something about the 11 million undocumented migrants in the United States. He's also going to address COVID, things like evictions and foreclosures that have been ongoing because people can't afford to pay their rent or their mortgage. He is going to put a federal halt on that to make sure that people can at least stay in their homes. And then when you talk about COVID, there's going to be masking in all federal properties and in interstate travel as well. And then he's going to push in the next month or so for a $1.9 trillion relief bill on COVID. He thinks that's hugely important. Janet Yellen, who's his choice to be Treasury Secretary, telling Congress yesterday at her first confirmation hearing, look, interest rates are low. This is the time you borrow money and spend big and worry about the deficit later on. Essentially, she's saying you've got to try and kickstart the economy out of the problems of COVID. And remember, the US is still to replace 10 million jobs that it had in March last year. So a lot of things to be done on the first day in office. A lot of presidents say, on my first day in office, I will. Donald Trump famously said he was going to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal and move the US embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Both things he eventually did, but not on day one. Joe Biden laying out a much more realistic timetable, a much more realistic agenda of what he's going to do as soon as he's behind the old Resolute desk in the Oval Office.
So Biden's incoming honeymoon period will be defined, I guess, by real, meaningful progress in the fight against COVID, if only because so many of those individual states, if you listen to senators, they feel completely abandoned by this administration, by the Trump administration, when it comes to the pushback against coronavirus. That's why we're going to see people like Anthony Fauci front and center again.
And Biden has been very realistic about what lies ahead for people across America. He doesn't believe that the worst of this crisis has yet been reached. He says that perhaps in a month's time, there will be even more bad news to come. The death rate might be even higher. And that's a marked change from what we got from Donald Trump, who, of course, initially said that the whole virus had been contained, that there wasn't a problem, that it would go away when the better weather came around. Remember, he initially planned to reopen the United States by Easter in 2020, and that just kept slipping and slipping because the problem got slightly better and then became much worse in the autumn and then the winter. And of course, there was the huge surge that the experts all predicted because of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we've still to see the surge coming from the New Year gatherings that we've had. And you were making the point yourself, Peter, at Andrews, Joint Base Andrews, when Donald Trump left, there was a gathering of supporters there and few of them were wearing masks. And we've had so many super spreader events at the White House itself. So Joe Biden is realistic with what he has to do. He believes 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days is doable. Anthony Fauci says it's doable. He's certainly complimentary that the Trump administration oversaw the development of a vaccine in what was incredibly quick time. I mean, some would say record quick time, and that is probably absolutely true. But the failure was in getting the vaccine out into the country. Operation Warp Speed did not work the way it was meant to work. And so the idea that there would be millions and millions of people vaccinated by the end of the year simply didn't happen because it fell down on the Trump administration watch. So Biden knows it's about logistics, knows it's about getting things to the right part of the country and getting the vaccine administered. And that's what he's been focusing on, and even added those sort of people with that sort of expertise to his COVID team to make sure that when he gets into the White House, he can start pushing the buttons on so many of these programs. It doesn't all fall to Joe Biden and to Donald Trump. There was a slip. Hey, I almost called him Donald Trump after speaking about him for 4 years. It doesn't all fall down to Donald Trump. There are those in the cabinet who have to do their job as well. Joe Biden believes he's appointed the right people to do the right job. There are critics who would suggest that Donald Trump didn't always do that he appointed the people who would be loyal to him first and foremost. And that is what hamstrung a lot of the things that Donald Trump tried to do in office. There wasn't the expertise, but goodness, there was the loyalty.
Alan, many thanks. A roll call of former presidents and first ladies, and in the case of Hillary Clinton, presidential candidate coming in. Of course, Mrs. Clinton stood against Donald Trump in the last presidential election campaign, not the one last year, the one 4 years before that. What did for her, I guess it would be fair to say, comes down to two main areas of her candidature, which was basically, on the one hand, she was a very, very divisive candidate. Americans either liked her or loathed her. They either thought she was intelligent and too well plugged in, and they thought she was shrill, or they seemed to react negatively to her policies because her policies were always very complex on the campaign trail. She seemed to be taking Barack Obama's policies and building on top of them, and it became a very, very tough sell. And up against candidate Donald Trump, he had that fantastically simple, and I'm not saying fantastic in a judgmental, editorializing way, it was fantastically simple. It was, of course, you've seen it on the baseball caps, you've seen it on the sweatshirts, on the flags, make America great again. 4 words, that was what got him into the White House. The Bushes as well, George W. Bush, his presidency, of course, defined by the events of 9/11 in New York and the Pentagon, and that carried on defining his presidency because there was a corollary effect off the back of the events of 9/11 that defined America's relationship with several countries in the Middle East as a direct result of his administration's reaction to the events of 9/11. Barack Obama and Michelle Obama there as well. We've just seen a shot of them. The Obamas and the Bushes do get on very well. They all get on with each other very well. There is a distinct air of friendship and genuine respect amongst those 3 former presidents and 3 former first ladies. We'll stay with these establishing arrival shots, and we'll talk to Shihab Ratanzi, who's on the National Mall for us. Another moment, another image of normality there, Shihab. Former presidents, former first ladies turning up, seeing their friends again, just to be there, to be close to this moment of American history.
And it's so interesting what you were saying there about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and why Hillary Clinton lost. I mean, one of the main reasons was, well, actually one of the main reasons was she didn't even bother campaigning in key battleground states like Wisconsin and Michigan. And in fact, it's interesting now, I mean, hearing Alan talk about the possibility of Donald Trump now running again, starting up his own party, and Alan saying, well, you know, some Democrats are already saying, oh, go for it, we'll split the Republicans. But remember, Donald Trump was Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign's favored opponent. They were doing everything they could to get him nominated at the time. They completely underestimated him. And as a result, also didn't campaign as much as perhaps they should have done during the election campaign, which resulted in Donald Trump's eventual victory. You can't count him out, and you can't count out the 73 million people who voted for him. And what Clinton was promising was more of the same. But there was enormous disappointment with the Obama presidency because after 8 years of Obama, he didn't bring change, and it became very clear that he was an establishment candidate who had continuity. But meanwhile, the enormous inequality in the United States continued unabated. He bailed out Wall Street famously and not Main Street. His healthcare proposal, Obamacare, was something off the shelf from the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing Republican think tank here in Washington, which relied on private insurance, which still left 30 million people uninsured, which led to huge rises in co-pays in the insurance bills that people with Obamacare had to pay. It was beginning to fall apart. People felt that they needed change, and they didn't want more of the establishment, and that's very much what Clinton represented, and that's why Trump was so attractive. As though we've been discussing, for all of Trump's bluster, he was still very much an establishment Republican presidency when you look at what he actually did. As he himself said at Andrews Air Force Base a couple of hours ago, enormous tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, and enormous defense spending, and packing the courts with enormously right-wing judges. This wasn't a radical agenda for a Republican. This is just what the Republicans always want to do. But meanwhile, we have the noises of the tweets and Donald Trump's own personal conduct. And even on immigration, he said that there would be a big crackdown. But in fact, actually, his record on immigration is more liberal in some ways than that of Barack Obama, who deported way more people. Barack Obama retains the nickname and the nickname and the memory of being the deporter in chief, which is perhaps one of the reasons why Joe Biden says he's going to begin on immigration as quickly as possible, because there is that residual disappointment with the Obama administration, which said all sorts of flowery things and about progressive ideals and helping immigrants, but in the end actually didn't necessarily live up to those ideals. And that's one of the reasons why there is that suspicion amongst progressives about the Joe Biden presidency. The only permit that has been given out to a demonstration here in Washington, D.C. today is from a progressive group, the Working Families Party, who've been given a permit for 5 protesters at Union Station, which is just north of the Capitol, because it's the progressives who are worried that for all of Joe Biden's talk of not being business as usual, although initially Joe Biden's pitch was, we'll go back to how things were before Trump, he has changed that shift. He changed that message quite a bit now, and he is saying all sorts of very progressive things. But at the same time, Joe Biden has a long record of being a center-right establishment politician, and he has this belief, apparently, that he can work with Congress, which didn't work with Barack Obama on anything. And the fear amongst the left is, in Joe Biden's zeal to make a deal and show bipartisan consensus after the divisive Trump years, he'll water down all those policies. Or worse, start taking on right-wing Republican policies and say, look, see, we have bipartisan consensus and we're cutting Social Security. That's what Barack Obama did. And again, Barack Obama's healthcare proposal was a Republican healthcare proposal. Barack Obama refused to even think about a public option and health Medicare for all because he felt it wouldn't pass. So he went immediately for the right-wing the right-wing proposal with Congress, and even then he didn't get congressional approval from the Republicans and had to do it through budget reconciliation, which is a congressional procedure, which again, Democrats now are saying Joe Biden should rely upon, not water down his proposals, for example, his $1.9 trillion stimulus package, in order to try and court Republicans. This is an emergency. The stimulus is needed. Don't water down the proposals in the hope of getting some Republican votes. Pass it through the means at his disposal in Congress, because, at least on paper, the Democrats are in control. They have both houses of Congress and the presidency. Barack Obama attempted to work with Republicans, it didn't work, and there's no indication yet that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are in the mood now to bury the hatchet, say, oh, look, the Trump days are over, let's all come together now. There's no indication of that whatsoever.
Shihab, for the moment, many thanks. Shihab Ratansi, our correspondent, my colleague there on the National Mall, adjacent to the Capitol building. You can see there as well, we were getting a few establishing shots of the Supreme Court judges who are there as well. There we go. Of course, that was something that Mr. Trump was determined to leave his fingerprints on when it came to appointing, particularly in the aftermath of the death of one Supreme Court judge, Anthony Scalia, in the early days of the Trump administration. Mr. Trump was clearly very, very keen to leave his fingerprints on the future quasi-political direction of the Supreme Court. You can see the Bushes there as well, George W. Bush, along with Mrs. Bush. The Obamas are there. The Clintons are there, perhaps. They may be questioning, should Donald Trump have decided to do the normal thing and to be there and to see his successor being sworn into office, as the Obamas did when Mr. Trump was sworn into office. Mr. Trump now probably more than halfway on his way on board Air Force One to Florida, Mar-a-Lago. He gave a little speech, not something that was on a prompting machine or an autocue machine. He was doing the thing that Mr. Trump likes doing. He was talking to a small crowd of people who he knew from the get-go. They liked him, they were applauding, they were cheering. Were there any face masks? No. Was there any social distancing? No, there was not. The key thing now, in the next few hours, we have two things to look forward to. One, the swearing in of Joe Biden, Mr. Pence, the outgoing US Vice President, and also that keynote speech from, he will by that point be President Biden, the keynote speech from Mr. Biden, giving us a sense of the tone, the tenor, the direction of travel that he wants from his presidency. Number one priority, dealing with the reality of coronavirus in the United States of America. 400,000 people have died.
It's just gone 11 a.m. here on the US East Coast on January the 20th, 2020.
Ladies and gentlemen, accompanying the Vice President, the Secretary of the Senate, the Honorable Julie E. Adams, and Chief Administrative Officer of the House of Representatives, Catherine Spindor.
Now the program is about to start. Please share the video and come and watch the live shows, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Michael R. Pence and Mrs. Karen Pence.
You can watch the body language here. What is going on exactly is something unbelievable. You can just see behind the mask, those who are wearing the mask, why the mask, there is smile at the back of the mask is unbelievable. And that's why I said politics is not easy thing. When you see George W. Bush and Bill Clinton and his wife, who was also running mate of who contested with Donald Trump, Obama, and Penny, the vice president of Donald Trump, you can say exactly there is something here fishy, and the other people are mourning, the rest are laughing, or the things which are happening are different. So this is what is happening in Capitol Hill. Let's just go back and watch what is going on exactly.
Indeed, George, we are getting information that some of those charged had talked about coming to D.C. days earlier before the January 6th certification of Biden's election to do, quote, hunting. Law enforcement officials put out a statement to court documents yesterday that members of these groups were communicating during the actual attack, communicating through Facebook messaging, talking about trapping members of Congress. Just extraordinary. And my sources are saying that
program is about to start now. We have
law enforcement. Fist fights.
The program is almost to start, so we have all the guests are in,
full of basically smoke and tear gas, and that the crowd was coming down the hall, and there were about 15 officers who fought back over 100 people. And he said at that point he was dragged out the door. And
ABC channel, what is going on in Al Jazeera as well.
Who, as I say, is attending the inauguration. He tweeted a simple picture saying, "Congratulations to my friend President Joe Biden. This is your time." And of course, Twitter, well, pretty much ablaze at the moment. Inauguration Day is one of the hashtags we're seeing plenty of, but also Good Riddance and Drain the Swamp are trending in the United States. We may have for you one of the most widely circulated pictures right now captioned, "The adults have arrived." This one also trending. It's people saying goodbye to Donald Trump using Joe Biden's campaign slogan. So we're keeping an eye on social media today because let's face it, it's a big part, certainly been a big part of the last 4 years of presidential life and probably will remain so into the Biden administration, perhaps just not quite as intense, shall we say. So we're here. It's Inauguration Day, as I say, the middle of a global pandemic, no members of the public out there watching. And of course, just weeks after supporters of Donald Trump overran that building behind me, trying to stop this inauguration from happening. But, as they say, the show goes on. It's going on right now in Washington, D.C. Extraordinary amount of ceremony going on, even under the circumstances in which we find ourselves. So I'd like to introduce you to Jennifer Victor, who you've already seen briefly on Al Jazeera earlier today, but she is a professor of political science at the Shaw School of Policy and Government at George Mason University here in Washington. Jennifer's going to be with us for the entirety of this broadcast today, which could be, well, it's going to be at least 3 hours, so I hope you're comfortable. It's not the warmest day, we have to say. In fact, Jennifer donated some lovely little foot warmers for me to keep things going. I'm told Kamala Harris arriving as well at the moment with her husband. Jennifer, let's just pause for a moment. You said earlier, it almost feels like we're sitting the wrong way, aren't we? Because you just want to look at that, and it's this odd, almost voyeuristic feel. Because there's not crowds and noise everywhere, we feel like we're watching this very small private ceremony, which we're almost not supposed to see, and yet actually it is the day for all Americans.
That's right. And it's, in some ways, it's distressing where there should be crowds. Instead, I see National Guard troops lined up, actually, in some kind of formations and in organized ways down there. So it's unsettling. It's certainly different. It's not the public affair that Americans expect on a day like today. But I think, 4 years ago, Donald Trump came here with the message of America first. And what we have here today is safety and security first. And that's why the crowds aren't here. Of course, the pandemic.
Sergeant at Arms, United States Capitol Police Officer, Private First Class Eugene O. Goodman.
Gene Goodman, Capitol Police officer, under assault 2 weeks ago, now escorting the Vice President-elect.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, Kamala Devi Harris, and Mr. Douglas Imhoff.
Lizzie Davis, you can see it in her eyes. She's smiling behind
You can see it. Her eyes are smiling. She got her pearls on as well. You know, her secret service code name is Pioneer. And that is just how so many see her. Of course, first woman district attorney in San Francisco. First woman attorney general in California, only the second black woman to become a U.S. senator. And all this, just as a reminder, from a woman who was born at a time when all black women in this country still could not vote. And so certainly this is a real moment. Of course, she just gave a fist bump to former President Barack Obama. And I would imagine if we're talking about the young girls, and I'd like to use Kamala's own words. So she said in the past that they see themselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. And as I imagine, as a result of this moment, that the young women and girls everywhere are going to dream a bit bigger and perhaps expect just a little more.
Hugs there for her stepchildren. David Muir, Doug Emhoff is going to carve out a new role we've never seen before, second gentleman.
And he helped choose what he would be called. Second gentleman was, of course, on the list of possibilities. He's comfortable with that. So we will call him the second gentleman. He's given up his post in a prestigious law firm out west. He will now teach at Georgetown, as Cecilia mentioned earlier in our coverage here. And his children have talked in recent days about how they call their own father, their dad, Doug. They said they're so comfortable with him and who he is that they also call him Doug in the household. And they said, our parents have such a relationship. They've been married 6 years or so now, that is so connected, so tight, so close that it weirds us out, in so many words, the sort of romance that's still alive, they say, between Doug and the Vice President-elect. But they support Kamala, as they call her, and it's a very close relationship, a very modern family. Kamala Harris very close to their mother. And as you mentioned, George, earlier, they've all had dinner together. Kamala Harris telling me when she was running for president that she is all about people knowing that she hears them, she sees them. She repeated that when she was chosen by Joe Biden. And one of the key things as we head into this historic day is not only is she the first woman to be vice president, as Byron said, children, young daughters, and sons all over America are now learning in real time what's possible in America. She says she hopes to play the same role for Joe Biden that he played for Barack Obama, to be the last person in the room, a willingness to be honest with him, to tell her what she believes, but also knowing that ultimately the choice will be his.
Thank you, David. Rachel Scott, one of the fun things about these inaugurations, about these early days of new administrations, is all the new people you meet.
Mm-hmm. It is, George, and you could see Kamala Harris there taking in this moment, the daughter of Indian and Jamaican immigrants, standing there ready to take the oath in a capital where she once interned, just miles away from Howard University, the historically black college where she graduated, where she joined Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Here on the grounds of the United States Capitol, a symbol of democracy that was built by slaves. This is her moment today as well. And when she was first elected district attorney of San Francisco, the first black woman to do so, she said she walked into her office and it was completely empty except for just one chair in the middle. But George, she was so happy to be able to take her seat.
The Honorable Nancy Pelosi.
And now we're seeing the president-elect making his way
accompanying
through the crypt into the vestibule.
And Mr. John Bessler. Staff Representative Stephanie Hager.
For what will be the capstone
Majority Leader, the Honorable
of an incredible political career.
L. Chow. And Staff Representative.
Began with election to Newcastle County Council more than 50 years ago. Elected the youngest senator back in 1972. He'll take the oath as the oldest president in 2021. There with Dr. Jill Biden. He'll be looking out over a mall that is so different from most inaugurals, as we've been saying, an empty mall, a mall empty of people, filled only with flags. Representing the Americans who can't be there, the Americans we lost over this last year to the pandemic. That is top of his mind, top of his agenda. Starting in about 45 minutes from now, when he will become President of the United States. If you saw the smile behind Kamala Harris's eyes, you see the sense of responsibility, I think, behind Joe Biden's eyes right now. He knows the challenges he's facing. He knows the divisions he must heal. And the first step will be when he addresses the country after taking the oath. It's starting to snow a little bit there in Washington. As you see Amy Klobuchar, she's leading the proceedings for the Democrats today, Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Ladies and gentlemen, accompanying the President-elect, the Staff Director, the Joint Congressional Committee and Inaugural
And that was
Ceremonies,
Hunter Biden
Fitzhugh Elder IV,
and his baby,
the Acting
named
House
after
Senate Sergeant at Arms,
his late brother,
Tim
Bo.
Blodgett, and the Acting Senate Sergeant at Arms, Jennifer Hemingway.
Here comes the escort committee. Terry Moran notices this escort committee, everybody from the Sergeant at Arms office is acting. That's, of course, because the Sergeant at Arms were relieved of their duty after the siege of the Capitol.
Because of that catastrophe in preparation and support of the law enforcement mission there to protect that Capitol. And as you've hinted, what we're seeing is the reclaiming of that hallowed ground in our country, from that violent mob back to the proper representatives of the people's democracy. They said it's our house. No, it's actually all our house, and there's a way to get there.
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden.
The step's not as full as normal, but the feeling is there. You saw that fist bump between President Obama, his Vice President Joe Biden, now President-elect, soon to be President. Taking in that moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
We will now hear from Senator Amy Klobuchar. She will be the first to welcome that somewhat more sparse inaugural crowd today.
Please welcome the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Vice President Pence, Mr. President-elect, Madam Vice President-elect, members of Congress and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does, goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible. My friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Well, I should have known when Senator Klobuchar got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all all the things we'd considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda till I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election, with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment. People all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division. It's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the president-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag. Thank you, Senator. We'll have to step from me. Thank you.
Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today, it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart, so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever. Amen.
Father, I've been a longtime friend of the Biden family, former president of Georgetown, as we heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
Well, you knew that was coming. You knew Lady Gaga had to have some kind of an amazing outfit.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. They does that star-spangled banner yet wave on the land of the free and
About the most exuberant Star-Spangled Banner you may have ever heard. Lady Gaga right there. Big move there for Lady Gaga. Now it is time for the Pledge of Allegiance. That will be led by Andrea Hall. She's a firefighter from Fulton County, Georgia.
Please welcome from the city of South Fulton, Georgia Fire and Rescue Department, President of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3920, Fire Captain Andrea M. Hall, for the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance.
First African woman in that department's history to be named captain.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For union, the first to endorse Joe Biden. And of course, Georgia, one of his biggest wins.
what you are all about to be part of America is a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right.
Of 2021. You just heard it. You just saw it. History was made. Kamala Harris taking the oath. It's first African American, first Asian American, first woman vice president of the United States. Behind her, first African American president, Vice President Pence. Lindsay Davis.
You know, she had her hand on two Bibles, one that belonged to Regina Shelton, a former neighbor and family friend who she's often described as like a second mother. It's also the same Bible that she used during her swearing in as Attorney General and also as Senator.
And now we're going to hear, after Hail Columbia, Jennifer Lopez is going to be singing as well.
Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's own United States Marine Band.
Lady Gaga, Jennifer Lopez, both making resplendent fashion statements today. That's not resplendent. I don't know what is.
We're just proud of how well you've grown up. 10 years ago, you went to take a notice.
Words I never thought I'd hear.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. for you and me, you and me. America, God shed His grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining sea. Una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Let's get live. This land was made for you and me.
One nation under God with liberty and justice for all. I'm trying to feel like this. Approaching now the moment for President Biden.
Well, that was great. The sun is shining, and Mr. President-elect, this is the first inauguration in the history of America where J-Lo was the warm-up act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
This is the moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
the
office of President of the United States
office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
First time ever chief played for Joe Biden. Joseph Robinette Biden will be the 46th President of the United States. He was congratulated as Mr. President. He will officially become President in about 9.5 minutes at noon, as he's giving the address. So Dr. Joe Biden overcome with emotion in that moment. Who wouldn't be? David Muir, the quest of a lifetime for Joe Biden.
George, this was the ultimate long game. He was elected to the Senate at 29, the youngest. He'll now be sworn in as the oldest president. He has waited and he has dreamed of this moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, please
so
be
many
seated.
years. He has told me the president's job is to heal, that the country needs healing, and he told me the words of a president matter.
Biden there, First Lady of the United States. The bells at Howard University will now ring 49 times for the inaugural address.
My fellow Americans, a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Chief Justice Roberts, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once in a century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. A cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this. Bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make healthcare secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America. We've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, Let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. If you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably from the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay in bed wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand, there are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. This is what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed the broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And will give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
The inaugural address of Joseph Robinette Biden, now 46th President of the United States. Powerful, personal, emotional at times, delivered with command. The new president called Americans to empathy and action. He noted those events of 2 weeks ago, the siege of the Capitol, noted that our democracy is fragile, is precious, but it has prevailed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
As I said, he called Americans to empathy, saying we can't harden our hearts, we must open our souls, put ourselves in each other's shoes, as his mother taught him.
Garth Brooks to perform Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Garth Brooks, Amazing Grace. Echoing the new president's calls to unite America. And now hear a poem from Amanda Gordon. Not quite social distance there for Garth Brooks. Hugs there. Former President Bill Clinton from the First Lady. Guess he can't help himself. Roy Blunt.
Hard not to be reminded that President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our culture is as close to both poetry and prayer as you could possibly come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow. How's that for a national debut? Most of us will remember where we were when we heard Joe Biden take the oath of office, give his inaugural address. We will all remember when we heard Amanda Gorman speak to the world as America's first National Youth Poet Laureate.
Gorman. Now for our benediction, I'm pleased to introduce Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our president, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being, regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
Echoes of Martin Luther King Jr. there. In the benediction, Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, with a prayer and a plea for unity. in this country so deeply divided right now. Cecilia Vega, unity, the theme of the day, the theme of this inaugural ceremony, the theme of Joe Biden's presidential campaign, clearly going to be the early theme of his presidency. He said, "My whole soul is in this, bringing America together."
George, this was an inaugural speech aimed at uniting the country, but so much of this was speaking directly to Donald Trump supporters or those who may be doubting Joe Biden's legitimacy. He said, "We won this. This is democracy. You are seeing it in action. It's not about a candidate. Democracy has prevailed." But he also used this moment to attempt to reclaim truth. We just saw an outgoing president who, by counts, issued more than 33 some odd thousand assaults on the truth, mistruths, and this was about taking truth and reclaiming facts, George.
He did do that, and Mary Bruce, you're there at the Capitol today. He did not shy away from mentioning that siege of the Capitol 2 weeks ago. Told the country, told the world, what we saw there will not prevail.
It was a fierce rejection of that kind of hate, of that kind of violence, as he did make this call for unity. And George, I have to say, I've listened to a lot of Joe Biden's speeches, and he talks about unity a lot. And what always strikes me is that Biden is not a man of hyperbole. He views unity not as some lofty goal, but as a practical necessity. And you heard that here today. Him saying to tackle this pandemic, to address racial injustice, the country's going to have to come together. You put aside your differences and work towards some common goals. As he said, without unity, there is no progress. And of course, without mentioning President Trump's name, it was a clear rejection of Trumpism. I kept thinking about, that famous line that Donald Trump said, "I alone can fix it." The message today from Joe Biden was, we alone can fix it. If this country has any hope of moving forward, it is going to take everyone coming together. And as Cecilia said, that message to the more than 70 million Americans who voted for President Trump was quite simple and very classic Joe Biden. Him essentially saying, just give me a chance.
Give him a chance. He used that folks a few times. Rachel Scott up there on Capitol Hill, part of that message, I will be a president for all Americans.
That's exactly what he was saying, and it was his main message on the campaign trail. It was the theme of this inauguration here today, and of course, it comes only 2 weeks after we saw what was an insurrection here at the Capitol. Joe Biden saying, this is a new chapter. Let's turn the page. Let's write this. And so much of this was about democracy prevailing at a time when it was tested. Democracy prevailing at a time when we saw rioters here try to overturn the results of an election. And I can't help but think about Vice President Mike Pence there, who was under immense pressure to do something that he constitutionally just could not do. And he resisted. And today he is there for this moment. President Trump is not, George.
He certainly is not. And of course, President Biden did thank his predecessors who were there today. Thank President Carter, who could not make it today. David Muir, that silence, failing to mention President Trump at all, that silence may have been the most eloquent and elegant rebuke possible.
It was profound not to hear. We were told this would be looking forward, but we did not hear him mention his predecessor at all. And there was the other moment, George, where he prayed in silent prayer for the 400,000 American lives lost in just 1 year in this country, and asked that America watching today pray with him. And I'm thinking about the millions of Americans around the country watching this, the 81 million who voted for Joe Biden, the 74 million who voted for Donald Trump. And we know the vast majority of Americans did not like what they saw 2 weeks ago. They were angered by it, frightened by it, saddened by it. And he said, we stand here just days after that mob tried to stop the will of the people. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. And he looked around him on the platform to Republicans and Democrats and said, we will get through this together. Look, folks. And he turned to his colleagues. We all understand here the world is watching. And he asked the American people, we face this all at once. Are we going to step up? He said, says, I believe we will. And the imagery of what they pulled off today, the 25,000 National Guard troops who secured the Capitol, the green zone that we talk about in Iraq and elsewhere, in the Capitol, to pull this off, to send a message not only to America but to the world that democracy prevails, fragile democracy. But on this very important day, it prevails.
As we see Kamala Harris, the new Vice President of the United States, her husband Doug Emhoff. The President, Lindsay Davis, confronted so many crises in that inaugural speech, talked about the constant struggle in America, the struggle that is as long as our republic, as old as our republic, between our ideals and the ugly reality of racism and nativism.
Right, and he also said the same words that Abraham Lincoln said in his first inaugural speech when he talked about making that appeal to the better angels of our nature. You know, I think I have to just talk about 22-year-old Amanda Gorman just for a moment, because that was more than a poem, that was preaching. And it was preaching born out of wisdom, passion, and dare I say pain. You know, her poem was entitled The Hill We Climb. And of course, this was not so much about Capitol Hill as much as it was the uphill battle that's been faced by so many Americans. And George, I just have to say, it has been a long time coming for Black and brown Americans. And, you know, President Joe Biden has long talked about, fighting for the soul of America. And he referenced that today. And he said, my whole soul is in this. And I think that Amanda, what she did was she revealed a bit of that soul for us in her poem. I do think that President Biden struck the right tone. The question now is, will it resonate for Americans? And just one additional point, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris has issued her first tweet on her official vice presidential Twitter, ready to serve.
She is ready to serve. She is serving now as Vice President of the United States. John Carl, vintage Joe Biden in other ways as well, referencing his mother, talking about how we all have to open our souls instead of hardening our hearts. We've talked about this before. We talked about it during the campaign. His empathy has been his core, sort of the core value that he's always expressed. He's calling on all Americans to share it.
It's what's defined him. It's what's defined him since he first came into the Senate after the tragic deaths of his wife and his child. I mean, I thought just for a moment, George, Amanda Corman, again, I think it was a memorable speech for Joe Biden, an important speech, the most important speech of his life. I think we will also remember Amanda Corman. And the line that stuck out to me was, even as we hurt, we hope. And the other thing, sandwiched in between, on the other side of Biden's speech, his Reverend Beeman saying, we must make friends of our enemies. We must make friends of our enemies, which defined the challenge that Biden takes on right now. And the line in Biden's speech that stood out to me was when he said, there is truth and there are lies. It's such a simple line, George. It is a platitude in any other context. But where we are now, the divisions that we face, we must make friends of our enemies. The challenge in doing that is that we have not simply enemies in a political context, but we have divided camps that do not accept the same definition of what is true and what is a lie. The people that stormed that Capitol in the name of a lie that was perpetrated and expanded on and pushed at every point by Biden's predecessor. So when he came out and said that line, again, that simple line, there is truth and there are lies. If he can convince us, if he can convince Americans of that once again, he'll go a long way to accomplishing what he needs to accomplish.
That would be a monumental victory for Joe Biden as 46th president of the United States. Mark Updegrove, presidential historian. We must not be enemies. We must not make friends of our enemies, as John Carl was just talking about. Echoes of Abe Lincoln right there.
It echoes Lincoln on the eve of Civil War in 1861, the worst domestic crisis that we have ever faced as a nation. We, of course, faced one 2 weeks ago, George. But I think what President Biden said at the top of his speech most resonated with me, which is, this is democracy's day. Democracy has prevailed. Despite what we saw from President Trump, his trying to sabotage this election, calling on insurrectionists to seize the Capitol, to try to overturn the result, to try to overthrow our country. Democracy triumphed. This today was a triumph of democracy.
Martha Raddatz, thank you. Mark, that was clearly the message that the new president had for the world as well. America has been tested, but
it's a great inauguration, and it's an historic one in the United States of America, and that one can go out up to the other part of the world. Those who have been staying in the powers, or those who are abused the democracy and the right of the voters, those who vote him out or vote somebody in. This is a great message to all of us, and we have to learn from it. And I appreciate being with us in Lagos State Media, who has been showing the live stream of inauguration of the new president of the United States of America and Vice President Kamala Harris. So thank you so much for being with us. You'll get more from the social media in Facebook, YouTube. The show will end up here. I was just trying to stream live the inauguration of the President of the United States of America and Vice President. Thank you so much. God bless you all. We have learned a lot from this video. Good night or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are tuning in. God bless you all.
It's your boy, I'm giving that thing. Control like a stand, control like a stand, Panchir America. Banyi doll, ban walk on your leg, Kankaro, what on a watching. Oga level leg, gear, wow, garay leg. Panda with ya, Panchir America. Panya doll of a no, Chingatonga Pandon, could you ever buy a check out? Pagupana, you, what ya be. Panchir America, Panchir Doll, Pan,